Good afternoon and welcome to a specially called meeting of the DeKalb County Board of Commissioners Finance, Audit, and Budget Committee. In addition to considering a single agenda item for action at our next meeting, we will be discussing and developing a recommendation on the millage rates that have been proposed by the administration for the 2022 tax year. We will have no minutes today to deal with, and so let's go ahead and get the agenda item out of the way. That's item 2022-1886. The acceptance of the federal year or the fiscal year 2023 grant award from the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council for the Juvenile Incentive Grant for Juvenile Courts Commitment Alternative Program in an amount of $478,782. Incidentally, I am joined currently by Commissioner Lorraine Cochran-Johnson, and we are looking forward to Commissioner Larry Johnson joining us. Is their staff from the juvenile court here to brief us on their project?
And if you are from the juvenile court, please go ahead and just identify. There you go, Ms. Jones. Give me one moment, please. All right, you should be able to control your audio and video at this time.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Keisha Jones, and I serve as the Grant Services Administrator for DeKalb Juvenile Court. Our court administrator, Mr. Colette Adenabo, does send his regrets. He is unable to attend today due to a pre-scheduled meeting with Superior Court Judge. However, thank you for allowing me this opportunity to speak to you today. This is a continuation grant from the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council called the Juvenile Incentive Grant for youth participating in the court's Commitment Alternative Program, or as we call it, CAP. The program provides services to youth between 14 and 17 years old who reside in DeKalb County. This funding allows the court to provide our most intensive supervision, youth and parent therapy in the home, and other evidence-based services to youth and families who encounter the juvenile justice system. The majority of the funding is allocated to the intensive therapy called multisystemic therapy, which lasts 4 to 6 months, and family functional therapy, which lasts 3 to 5 months. Additionally, we are able to provide other tools youth will be in order to be successful, such as education advocate, one-on-one tutoring, mentoring, and other positive community activities. The grant cycle began July 1, 2022, and it will end on June 30th, 2023. The amount awarded is $478,782, and no match is required from the county. We respectfully request that you consider moving the item forward, as this funding is critical to the continuation of the program and also therapeutic services for the families.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. I appreciate that comprehensive explanation of the grant program. One question I personally have, and certainly expect you had success in this, but what metrics do you use for measuring success within the program in terms of either completion rate or recidivism rate or other metrics that you would use to evaluate the efficacy of the program?
So there's several different metrics that we use. The first thing is we want to see how many families are actually successful in completing the therapeutic part. We believe that is one of the most important pieces of the program, because it does last 4 to 6 months. And so we want to make sure that we have families who are coming through and not actually just starting the program, but actually finishing that piece of the program, because not only does that provide services to the youth, but it also provides services to the parents. Because we all know if we're servicing the youth and then the parents have not made a shift or a change in how they interact and how they supervise their children, they will not be successful long term. So that's one of the metrics that we look at. Last year we had like an 87% completion rate for our therapeutic piece of it. Then we also look at our evidence-based program, which we use a cognitive behavioral therapy program called Thinking for a Change. Is nationally used for offenders, adult as well as juveniles. And we had a high completion rate last year for that program as well. We actually, not in this past year, but the year before, had 100% completion rate, as well as one of the highest rates in terms of how it was facilitated. So those are some of the metrics that we use.
Super. All right. Are there any questions first from Commissioner Cochran-Johnson, or still don't see Commissioner Larry Johnson, and then from other commissioners?
Although I'm not visible, Commissioner Rader, about the program, I'm very familiar with the program, the services, and I say the critical services that they provide to families. And I want to also acknowledge Colette, who isn't with us, because he is a true champion as it relates to the delivery of these services and being very innovative and dedicated to the success of the program participants. So I truly have no questions about the program at all.
All right, thanks very much. I see Commissioner Terry and Davis Johnson here. Any questions from y'all?
No, Mr. Chair.
No?
I have none, thank you.
All right, well, seeing no other questions, Commissioner Cochran-Johnson, I'd entertain a motion on 1886.
Yes, I would move that we approve the item as presented at this time.
Okay, the motion is to recommend approval to the Board of Commissioners. I would second that motion. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye and show like sign with your hand.
Aye.
That motion is approved by all on the call today. And now we will move to the millage rate resolution. And just to set the stage, we received a presentation at the previous meeting of the committee, I think on the 28th. At that meeting, we resolved by a vote of the committee to separate the budget amendment from the resolution setting the millage rates, but requested a report back on the utilization of the current $62 million e-host reserve to further reduce the tax bills of DeKalb County homesteaded taxpayers who are eligible to receive e-host credits, which include all DeKalb County taxpayers, I believe, except those in the city of Atlanta where the e-host sales tax is not levied. And so I would ask Mr. Williams if they have first a report on the utilization of the e-host reserve, and then secondarily, if there is a substitute that we could use to focus exclusively on the millage rates and the related e-host credit.
So a couple things, and thank you, Mr. Chair. And we will be able to discuss the substitute item, the bifurcated, where we've separated the budget
right
from the millage rate, because you're correct, the original one did have the millage rate. And we also have revised numbers that we'd like to present as it relates to the e-host and the overall projection. So if it's good, okay. So thank you. So and thanks for the opportunity to once again kind of share our story and describe what this budget does, where it's going. And I think it's important to first understand that this budget is really a continuation of a narrative that began in 2017. And that beginning was when CEO Thurman came on board or was elected. He made a commitment to responsible and conservative, quite frankly, budgeting, a strategy that would bring a couple things. One, fiscal stability to the county, If you'll recall, there was a structural imbalance of about $25 million at that time, which we have addressed over the past number of years under the CEO's leadership and the board's leadership. And fiscal stability to the county and predictable tax savings to the residents. And how did that predictable tax savings manifest itself? If we will recall, the CEO in 2017 worked with the state legislator to develop the equalized homestead option sales tax, the EHOS/SPLOS referendum. And that development of the EHOS/SPLOS referendum assured DeKalb homeowners would receive approximately $110 million in property tax savings annually. So that was the commitment made by the CEO on behalf of the county and endorsed by the entire governing authority, of course, that ultimately led to the referendum. And that referendum was, and we can put up the slide, TJ, that referendum was overwhelmingly approved by the voters, over 71% of the total.
So let me just confirm that you said that the referendum involved the approval of the new establishment of an equalized homestead option sales tax, which dedicated by statute all collections from the e-host penny to tax relief. Is that correct?
That is correct. Excellent. Yes, Commissioner Grader, it was coupled, and the funds can only be used for tax relief. And so that was a unique feature to DeKalb County. And that was the commitment made by the CEO and the governing authority, the entire board, and the residents overwhelmingly approved that. So what I'd like to do, and that kind of gives a background as to what this budget represents as it relates to a continuation of that story of being fiscally responsible, addressing the $25 million structural imbalance, providing stability in our millage rates. I mean, we still have a little movement, but nothing like it used to be. Over the past 5 years, we have steadily worked to stabilize the millage rates and provide that predictability to the homesteaded resident. So, Mr. Sigler, if you can kind of begin, and that $110 million represents more than $660 million. And TJ, you can continue, and I'll jump in from time to time.
Thank you, Mr. COO, and good afternoon to the committee and chair. Apologize, I was having some technical difficulties with my presentation earlier, but it seems to be up. So starting in 2018, which the eHost had an effective date of April 1st, 2018, and going through the end of 2021, the amount of property tax relief that's been provided to DeKalb homeowners is $454 million. And that represents, I believe it was 69% of the $660 million total that we alluded to, or that Mr. COO mentioned earlier.
So you said that we collected 669 and we've used 454 for tax relief. Is that right?
No.
I'm sorry. So how much have we collected from eHost since 2018?
See if I have that on a column slide. I think I do. So it doesn't total it here, but it's roughly 260 plus 151. So that's 401 plus the 91 or 92. So it's close to 500 million at this point.
Okay.
And that's where the eHost reserve comes in. So I think we'll get to that later on in the.
So it's 454 plus the eHost reserve. Is that right?
Right. But what has actually been credited towards the towards property tax relief thus far from 2018 until 2021 is the 454.
Right. And so if you added the 61,682, 581 to that, you should get the total eHost collections. Is that right?
Not exactly, because that number, the 61 million, that's a projection of what it will be at the end of 2022.
Oh, okay.
Mr. Chair, yeah, if TJ, is able to go through it in sequence, I'm sure a lot of the questions will be answered.
I got you. Okay.
Thanks. Mr. Sigler?
And as proposed, the 2022 millage rates and e-host credit would provide an additional $137 million this year in property tax relief, which would bring the grand total through 2022 to $591 million. I believe that's close to 90% of the 660 that we've mentioned previously.
Okay. I see some hands raised, so I'm going to ask Mr. Metelsky, it's Commissioner Cochran-Johnson and then Commissioner Terry, if you'd please let Commissioner Cochran-Johnson and then Commissioner Terry.
Yeah, thank you so much. Just wanted clarity, Mr. Sigler, the 591 that you mentioned is the total amount collected, and that's before any usage. Is that correct?
The 591 would be the total amount provided in property tax
To date.
forgiveness through 2022.
Okay.
If the millage rates and e-host credit are adopted as proposed.
We don't have a firm number for how much we'll have.
We don't have the 2022 number because it's a projection.
Well, you're projecting
I saw a
2022 in the relief. So
Yeah, I think part of what makes this difficult to one, explain and two, understand is that the property tax credits lag collection somewhat. And that's because each year when we're, developing the credits, we don't have incomplete information for the current year. And so we're relying on previous year's collections to determine the credit. And so
isn't it true that we are required to rebate an amount equal to the prior year's collections? Is that correct?
I don't know if that's I would probably defer to the county attorney on that. I don't recall that, but I could be mistaken.
All right. Well, that would be a question that would be, relevant, obviously, as to what we are required to rebate to the taxpayers, and would be, of interest to know. Commissioner Cochran-Johnson, do you have another question?
I do not, but I would like to hear the answer to the question you just posed.
Mr. Phillips, I know that you were on the call. You may not be able to pull that out of your hat right this moment, but if you would try to find out what eHost requires us to rebate to the taxpayer.
I think Commissioner Terry has a question as well.
Yes, and then I'll go to Commissioner Terry.
Thank you, Ms. Chair. Just in so I wanted to clarify. So when it says provide an additional, that's not in addition to what was already going to happen. You're just saying it's another 137 million to the total collected.
Right. That's correct.
Okay. I think the word additional makes it sound like it's more than what was originally planned. So maybe, I don't know if that's just a wordsmithing issue, but the 137 million is just what's projected for 2022.
Correct.
It's part of this budget.
And I think that is tied back to our two countywide levies, which is the general fund and the hospital fund. So our practice in the past has been only to rebate against the general fund and the hospital fund, regardless of how much was collected in eHost revenues. Okay, so I'll turn it back over to Mr. Sigler and quit interrupting him so much.
Thank you. So in 2022, the eHost credit, as proposed, would provide, again, 100% credit. The chair is corrected to go towards the countywide millage rates, which are levied for the general and the hospital funds. And what that would provide is an average savings or an estimated savings of $1,200 for homeowners with a house with a fair market value of $325,000, which That value is the average based on 2021 numbers.
Okay.
All right. This chart simply shows the collections in eHost starting in 2018. One thing to keep in mind is 2018 was a partial year, so this really represents 9 months of collections. Then you'll see that for those 9 months, it was maybe slightly more than $10 million per month. That trend continued pretty closely in the following year. It looks like we had a slight uptick from that number, but still we ended up with $127.7 million in 2019. 2020 was, of course, the pandemic year, the first year of the pandemic, that is. And what we saw there was first several months were right in line with what they had been in previous years. And then starting in late spring, so in the April and May timeframe, we saw, pretty drastic reductions of about 20% from what it had been in previous months. And so at that time, the belief was that we could be faced with that reduced revenue, for the duration of the year. But what had actually occurred is later in the year, collections rebounded basically to the level that we had expected previously, as well as we received there was an audit adjustment from the state DOR, which was an additional about $3 million that came to the county in 2020.
When did the online facilitators sales tax payments come online?
I don't know specifically, but I think it might have been in 2019. I will find the answer to that, but I don't recall off the top of my head.
Because that is another source of strengthening of that revenue source.
Right. Then in 2021, you'll see that there was, a significant increase from 2020, going from 129 to 151. That's about a 16% increase year over year, which is very different from what we experienced with hosts prior to eHost. I believe from 2012 through 2017, the average annual change in host revenue was only about 1 to 2%. So we're seeing, very, more volatility in the eHost revenues than we did previously. In the final column here, this is a revised projection for 2022. So the projection we were originally going with that, we used to come up with the projected eHost reserve at the end of the year was just looking at the current trend continuing. After having some more discussions, we decided that with the economic indicators all pointing towards a recession, that we wanted to be more cautious in our projections for this year. So you'll see that that's revised down to $140 million in 2022.
What is the year-to-date collections experience?
So far through the last month that we would have received was the May collections. So it's 5 months. It was $65 million.
So is that on track with 2021 or is it less than 2021?
That would be on track with 2021, but we are anticipating that there could be a slowdown.
So I understand that we could have a slowdown. It also occurs to me that inflation is driving up the nominal, volume of sales because, for a similar market basket. So inflation actually accrues to an increase in host revenues, right? Independent of the other.
Right. Yeah. And there's really a lot of factors that we think might have, had an effect or had caused that increase in 2021. One is, like you said, inflation. As prices rises, the sales tax rises. Second is the stimulus or the recovery funds that came from the CARES Act and ARP and provided additional disposable income for families. And then also the shift during the pandemic away from spending on services, restaurants, to more consumer goods. And services typically aren't taxed, subject to the sales tax as much as as opposed to the consumer products.
Okay, and Commissioner Terry has a question.
Yeah, just on that front. So this last December, there was a bump, and I think we were just maybe offhand talking that maybe it was like the Christmas bump. And so is that basically what kind of happened that last year, and the projections, if you keep month to month, it might be constrained, but there might be a bump at the end of the year. We just don't know though.
Right. So we do typically have a bump at the end of the year in December. So I think last year, the December collections were about $15 million versus kind of a 12 to 13 million in a typical month. So I would still expect there to be some sort of bump in December, but this is just looking at kind of a regression to the mean of what we've experienced in the past with eHost collections. And again, the thinking there is that 2021 is really an outlier in that there were a lot of factors that could have driven that increase there that we don't believe are going to continue into the future necessarily.
All right, Commissioner Cochran-Johnson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to believe, and I'm not sure, so I'm going to ask the question, that the reason we traditionally see that bump at the end of the year, I believe individuals that pay their taxes, property taxes independently, is it August or July and September when those bills are due? But would it also play a factor that people do not wish to have those taxes roll over? So at the end of the year, you're seeing people come in and you're seeing a greater collection. I'm not sure, but in terms of, as we're having the conversation as to why during certain periods we see this rise in collections.
Right. Well, I think you're, spot on when we were talking about property tax revenues, but this is strictly the sales tax revenue. So that would not have an effect on the eHost revenues, payment of the property taxes at the end of the year.
Mr. Sigler, you mentioned recession as a potential risk. What sort of erosion in sales tax collections did we have on a percentage basis during the last recession?
So I believe over a 2-year period, going from 2008 to 2009 to 2010, the first year, the decline was about 5%, and followed by a second year of 5.5%. Over the course of those 2 years, a combined 10.5, and actually it would have been slightly more than that, because it compounds.
Right. So on an annual basis, is this reduction in your expectation in line with that 5 to 5.5%?
Right. Basically, what we did for this projection was we took the collections in 2022 year to date, and then we projected the remaining 7 months of collections at that lower, at a 5% reduction. I believe we actually used 6% to be, more on the cautious side.
Okay, so you took the 5 years that we have in the bag, or the 5 months that we have in the bag as being in the bag, and then from June through December, you expected 5% less than in 2021. Is that right?
I believe I misspoke. I think it's 6% is
6% less than
2021. Yes.
Less than what we've collected thus far this year.
Less than what we've collected this year, not what we collected in 2021. I don't understand how you would, in other words, the remainder of the year should follow the same profile that 2021 should, right? Because there's, the cycle of sales tax collections is an annual one, more or less. So it would seem that we would look at 2021's actuals and reduce those by 6%, but that's not what you did?
I think I follow you, but what I did was I looked at what we had projected previously for 2022, which was based on 2021 collections and the trends that we saw, and then reduced that number by the 6%.
Okay, and then for the entire year?
No, just for those 7 months that remain.
Oh, okay. And then what was the original projection for 2022?
Well, the original projection, let me get that number, because we were looking at a different projection at mid-year, but what we're doing now is revising that. Sorry, I don't have that number right in front of me, but off the top of my head, I would say it was in line with last year, so
Okay.
150.
Okay. And so is 140.7 6% less than 151.4?
So 6% would be $9 million. So it's roughly that amount different.
All right. So over the entire year, notwithstanding being in line for the first 3 months or the first 5 months of the year, nevertheless, so that's actually a larger than 6% reduction for the remaining months of the year. Is that correct? So it's in excess since we already have 5 months in the bag. So you're probably
I
7 or 8%.
I would agree that.
Okay, just trying to understand, the dynamics behind the projection. All right, that's great. Is this projection what the agenda item depends upon for the e-host reserve projection that you have in Schedule A for mid-year 2022?
Yes, it would, affect the projections for 2022. However, since we bifurcated the millage rate resolution from the mid-year budget, this really does not come into play in the 2022 millage rates because the collections for 2022 would then be applied as credits in 2023.
Well, I understand, but I was looking at what you're projecting the e-host reserve to be would be diminished from what you had originally proposed in attachment A or schedule.
That's correct.
All right. And do you know what that number now will be in terms of your projection of e-host reserve at year end?
Should be able to get that. So in the original Schedule A for mid-year, again, that projection was just based on, the months prior in 2022. The projection was $158 million in e-host collections. So that's what, when we were looking at that number, that was going to produce and increase the e-host reserve by, roughly $21 million. In 2022. So going into 2023, it would be $20 million higher. This would, assuming that this projection is the actual collections, the e-host reserve would remain relatively flat from what it was to start this year.
At 44 million?
Correct.
Well, that's interesting because you're only reducing the projection by 9 million, but you're suggesting that the reserve would erode from your prior projection by almost 20 million.
Well, I think we're talking about two separate projections. So the $9 million reduction that you referred to is what we had originally built into the 2022 budget. That is the budget, the revenue anticipation that's been approved for eHost for 2022. We had developed another projection that was in the Schedule A for the mid-year budget, and that was the higher number, the 158, which then we based the projected eHost reserve on. So really the difference is between that higher projection and then this, more conservative projection. In either case, whatever the actual final actuals are, that's going to determine what the eHost reserve is going into next year.
Okay, so what I see here on the Schedule A that you provided and is currently attached to our agenda, it says that the approved fiscal year 2020 budget projected essentially $140 million in eHost sales tax revenues. And that your proposal at mid-year was to increase that projection by essentially $15 million to a total of $154,343,540. Right?
That's correct.
Okay. So what's interesting to me is now I'm still not seeing those numbers track with what we are showing as eHost revenue. So you're saying it'll be 140 million. That was the approved fiscal year 20. So you're basically taking it back to what the initial projection was. Is that right?
Right. I think maybe the best way to explain it is we're assuming that whatever, that a lot of the factors that were in place in 2021 are going to no longer be in effect going forward. And so we're using kind of the prior year numbers to kind of adjust to what we believe it's going to be for the rest of this year.
Notwithstanding a 5 months of strong performance and a historic pattern of a 6% erosion during a recession. Okay, I mean, that's a conservative projection. And again, I still, the numbers still don't seem to entirely add up insofar as, our original projection was 140 million. You projected an additional 15 million. And now you are reducing the projection by 9 million, but it appears that you're still seeing the reserve revert to 15 million under what our approved budget was. But
and when you say this is a conservative projection, you're correct. It is. And so what I would, I think you could probably consider this to be more of a lower bound, but we don't want to, anticipate more and then end up short at the end of the year. Kind of the beauty though of the eHost reserve is it's self-correcting, it's self-leveling each year. So
well, I've seen
if we do better than we expected, we'll increase the reserve. If not, we'll take the reserve down.
Right, but the eHost reserve is continually going up over time, right? It is increasing from 2018. I would imagine that it was zero because it didn't exist. But each year it's been going up, hasn't it?
So in 2018, starting the year, you're correct, it didn't exist. When we looked back though at the 2018, what credits were given, and then also what the actual collections were, there was a gap between that. So we based the 2018 credit off of 75% of 2020, or excuse me, 2017's host collections, because that was the best data point we had at the time. And so in reality, for those 9 months that eHost was in effect, it did bring in, I want to say something to the tune of $6 million more than what we had, used to base the credit, what we based the credit on.
So then we had a $6 million reserve at the end of the year.
Right. I mean, we hadn't really, the concept of calling it reserve, we hadn't developed that yet. That was really during 2020 that we came up with that and how to keep track of it. So,
okay. So in 2020, what was our eHost reserve at the end of the year? And I see your hands, commissioners.
at the end of 2020, it was almost $24 million.
Okay. So it seems to me that the eHost reserve has been increasing each year based upon the fact that we're collecting more in eHost revenues than we are spending in eHost credits against the countywide levies. Isn't that true?
That is true. And I think, let me move ahead a few slides and then
If we have an opportunity, Commissioner Rader.
Yep.
Because and I think there's about 4 or 5 more slides.
Okay, well, before you move, yeah, and I appreciate, I told you I wouldn't continue to interrupt. I just wanted to.
The reason being though, because I think we're on the same page generally.
Great.
But it is how the funds that have accumulated will be dealt with. I mean, so that's all part of our plan.
Yeah.
When I said at the outset that our goal, the CEO's goal from day one, our collective goal is stability and predictability, quite frankly.
I understand.
So it's not lost on us that the fund balance in the eHost reserves continues to grow. At the end of the day, in year 6, there's only a 3-month collection. And at that point, and I don't want to get to the end of the story, but just to help TJ, all of that relief would be provided to the residents, anything that remains, because it has to be. And so that is a leveling, quite frankly, so that there is a certain amount of predictability that each year residents can anticipate, hopefully a tax relief akin to what they have been getting. But TJ, if
okay, and but I'm going to, but out of respect for my colleagues, I'm going to call first on Commissioner Cochran-Johnson if she has a question, and Commissioner Terry.
Well, a bit of that conversation just answered it. So I'll just be quiet until I hear the rest of the presentation. But also, I just want to confirm our eHost runs concurrent with our SPLOST. Is that safe to say?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So both of these, we're approaching the end, so they will both be going back to the ballot. And I think right now the conversation, although we're going back and forth over numbers, and it seems very hard to determine with a science exactly where the numbers will end at any given year. I think it's safe to say at this point we have in hand about 64 million. Is that correct? That could be utilized?
That would be based on a projection. I think the better number to cite is what it was, at the start of the year, which was roughly 45, 46 million.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So, and the reason being is that, at the end of 2022, we will have, actual numbers of what we collected in eHost versus the credits given. And then that will give us the true number that would be added to the reserve at that point.
Okay. Commissioner Terry.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So when folks refer to our fund balance or our reserves in general, the eHost reserves are part of that fund balance
They are. I mean, we listed it out separately so you can see, the various components. But when we, talk about it in aggregate, it is included as part of that.
It's actually our single largest category of reserve funds.
That
what is
depends.
what is the breakdown there?
Well, that depends. Again, if you're looking at, the general fund and hospital funds only, if you're looking at all the tax funds. So I believe, and I don't have this number in front of me, but we ended last year, the fund balance was about $130 million. And we were projecting that the fund balance would remain somewhere in that vicinity. So it's about maybe 1/3 of the total fund balance for the tax funds.
But it is larger than our general fund budgetary reserve.
If you look at it, I think if you're looking at the projections for 2022, it would be, but I don't believe that's the case this year.
Well, this year in the budget that we adopted in February, we adopted an expectation of an e-host reserve of 44 million and a budgetary reserve of 40 million.
So I think I'll be better able to explain if we can, move
let's
ahead
go
in a
ahead
few
and move
slides.
forward.
And I think this gets to, again, maybe Commissioner Cochran-Johnson's point, and as well as Mr. Williams' point about we are preparing for the transition from this e-host to whatever is next. And in the end, the final, year, whatever is in that e-host reserve will be provided as tax relief. So this is, the slide we've been on with the e-host revenue, but the next slide shows one of the other variables in all this, which is the Homestead Tax Digest. And what you can see is, it's grown steadily, especially if you're looking at the gross tax digest. But if you look at the net, it's fairly flat. I mean, there has been growth, but you can see that gap between the gross and the net widening. And so what that means is as we've gone through from 2018 to 2022, and again, the 2022 numbers are based on our projections now, the homestead property tax liability has not kept pace with the collections of e-host. And so that's what is generating the reserve numbers. And again, every year we're going to recalculate what the e-host reserve is based on the collections and the credits given in the previous year. And then in 2024, the e-host expires, this e-host expires at the end of March. So we'll have 3 months of collections that year, plus the collections, whatever's in the e-host reserve that will then go to property tax relief in 2024.
But should we fail to renew the SPLOST, then we would simply revert to the prior format of host. The sales tax wouldn't go away. It would have a different structure that would only commit 80% of the collected taxes to property tax relief and 20% to capital, right?
Potentially, I think that could happen. I think the way that this e-host was structured, if it's not renewed, then you're correct that host would go back into effect. But I also don't know if that'll be the case when we're renewing this, the next round of SPLOST and e-host. So I think we have an opportunity to look at what that transition looks like, and perhaps manage it better than the transition from host to e-host, because that was the other problem, with us trying to, wrap our heads around all this, is that, we went from the host legislation, which was very detailed and specific about how everything was going to be calculated, to the e-host statute, which was very,
Mr. Chair.
vague in a lot of cases about how the credits would work and so forth.
Sure.
But, okay, and I'll recognize you, Mr. Williams, in just a second. But as the law is currently constructed, a failure to renew the SPLOS would result in two things. First, it would cause the reversion from e-host to the host structure. And the second thing it would cause is the expiration of the homesteaded assessment freeze. So we know that if we don't put it on the ballot in 2023, or if that ballot measure fails, that host taxes will continue to be collected at the rate of 1%. SPLOS taxes will not be collected, and that we will revert to the prior host framework and the obligations under that host framework, but we will still be collecting a host tax. There is no current scenario by which the host tax would not be collected for 12 months in 2023, I don't think. Unless
So
true?
this is my understanding of what would happen if, as you said, there are no changes to the laws and we don't renew eHost and SPLOS.
Not if there are no, I mean, you can't predict what would happen if there were changes because we don't know what those changes are. But if there are no changes of the law and we either did not put it on the ballot and it expired or it was defeated, then we know what would happen, right?
Right. And I think that would put us in a situation similar to the one we were in 2018, where we had a partial year of host followed by 9 months of eHost, where the opposite would be true in that case. We'd have 3 months of eHost plus 9 months of host in that year. And I think we'd probably approach it the same way that we did in 2018, where there's a credit that's provided based on the eHost, and then an additional credit based on host. And, those two combined would provide tax relief for 2024.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And we'll go now, I guess, to Commissioner Terry, but we are trying to let him get through the presentation.
Right, and then when there's an opportunity, I think the CEO would like to speak.
Oh, okay. I did not see him raise his hand, but Commissioner Terry and then the CEO.
Yes, could Mr. Siegler just explain again that last slide, the slide previous, but the gross compared to the net? I didn't quite track why that gap is widening.
Right. Really, the primary reason for that is the assessment freeze exemption. So what you're seeing in the blue, the gross tax digest, that is based on the fair market value and then at 40% of that. So it's before any of the exemptions are applied. And then the net is after the exemptions are applied. So if you have a homestead freeze exemption on your home and it appreciates in value, your exemption will also increase by that same amount. So that's why, even though we see, a significant growth in the gross, that the growth in the net is relatively depressed compared to the gross. Did that answer your question?
Yes, that's a really good deal for the homestead taxpayers.
Right, and I think they get quite a few benefits from both eHost and the homestead exemption freeze as well.
Can I just ask a follow-up question there real quick? So I know there's no cap. So, in terms of, $1 million homes and sort of how the eHost treats them, it doesn't really stop. I mean, no matter how valuable your home is, that sort of percentage just sort of keeps going up. We did pass this in our legislative agenda item. We did, I think in terms of more equitable formula, it seems to me that one way to provide sort of more kind of middle class homestead tax relief would be to, in essence, stop collecting, or I guess stop crediting the eHost to homes over $1 million. And I think the tax assessor sent around a kind of a chart that sort of described about, it was like $8 million was sort of going to $1 million homes and above. So
I would just suggest that the complexity of this, the legislative agenda is not currently on our agenda for the FAB meeting. So let's work with what we know. Then let's go now. I think, Mr. Williams, I didn't see CEO Thurman on, but if he is on, certainly would yield.
Yes. Yep, Mr. Matowski, if you'd give the CEO ability, he's on his iPhone.
I believe he has it. CEO Thurman, I'll ask you to unmute. And if not, use the raise hand feature because I did give someone that I thought was you and I don't see anyone else. Mr. CEO, are you there?
I'm not seeing any phone numbers on the.
Well, there was an iPhone. I've renamed it to.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
There he is. Great.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, good afternoon.
Yeah. Good afternoon.
This has been a fascinating conversation, actually. So thank you so much for placing it on the agenda. Just having lived the recent history, it's an amazing moment. The one thing I would like to say, Mr. Chairman, if give me an opportunity, is to remind our citizens and taxpayers and homeowners of the historic amount of tax relief that's being generated by DeKalb County's government. No other county jurisdiction has an e-host. And so we talk about it in relative numbers, but unfortunately, very few people put this in context. When we made the promise in 2017 that we were going to generate $660 million in tax relief to homesteaders, some people basically flipped it off. They didn't believe it to be true. And so as Mr. Siegel and Mr. Williams have pointed out, that we are fulfilling that promise. And on the threshold of really reaching the $660 million goal at year 5, and with additional tax relief coming. So I just wanted to emphasize that. And that was a promise made, and it's a promise that has been kept. Oftentimes in politics, me included, we say things or we make promises, but this government, this governing authority, and the taxpayers have fulfilled that promise. And I'll stop. The last thing that was mentioned that I think is very important as we come to the close of the e-host, this 6-year period, is that we don't want to put ourselves at risk in the last year of forcing a significant tax increase in 2024, simply because there will only be 3 months of collection. So the strategy that we incorporated from the very beginning, once we figured out that, hey, we can use a reserve, was at the back end, because there will only be 3 months of collections, that we could, if a reserve existed, we could use that reserve to avoid a major tax increase in 2024, because we don't know what's going to happen. Hopefully it'll get extended, maybe not with e-host, but by using that reserve, we can use that to make sure that in 2024, in the midst of elections and all the things that's going to be happening in 2024, that we don't force a major property tax increase on homesteaders in DeKalb County. So, and why? And the one thing I remember back in Insurance Trust Fund, conducted an interview, and I told a reporter that we are more than happy to pay unemployment benefits. Well, 13 months later, we had $0 and I was borrowing money from the federal government. We just don't know, but that has always informed me that when we're looking into the future, I don't call it conservative. To me, it's being responsible when you were traveling or sailing in unknown water. So with that, I'll stop just as a way of background. And I thank you all again, the commissioners, for the conversation. And as I've listened for the last 30, 40 minutes, it's just been amazing and fascinating to hear it and how it's playing out and has played out to the benefit of taxpayers here in DeKalb County. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. Mr. Sigler, please proceed. Oh, now I see Commissioner Davis Johnson has a question.
Yeah, if the CEO could repeat about 2 minutes of what he was speaking about concerning the e-host tax in DeKalb as compared to other jurisdictions, because he was cutting off, it was going in and out. And I think it was very important. I think it's very important to hear exactly what is being said. So it was a bit at the end that was cut off that I would like for him to repeat.
Yes, ma'am, Commissioner. Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Certainly.
The point is, and you know, I'm an old guy. I've been around, and y'all know I ain't running no more for DeKalb CEO, so I can just say what is in my heart. Let me tell you what's in my heart. I don't believe that we have received appropriate credit for the fact that we have promised $660 million in tax relief and have delivered on that promise. And when it's all said and done, we'll have generated over $700 million in property tax relief for the citizens of DeKalb County. Unfortunately, it hadn't been somehow not newsworthy to note that. And, you know, and I don't criticize anyone, I just observe. But I just want commissioners and members of the government authority and members of this government to know that we made a promise and we have kept that promise. And we were promising 660, we're going to exceed that. That's an amazing accomplishment for this government, a democratically controlled government. And despite what the naysayers say, there should be some recognition and acknowledgement of that. And with the reserve, we're going to finish this race. And we will have the way that I think we can all should be probably going to ensure, I think, a positive vote for the continuation of it. So that's all I'm saying. And I hope that, and I know 2 of the commissioners may not, that was prior to y'all being elected. So the reason I'm saying that to you all now are inheriting this resource, and please, and I know you will, just take this story forward in terms of the great work that's being done for the people of DeKalb County. And on the other side with sales tax, I see the street business. There's not been a hint of a scandal, but that didn't get reported. Hadn't been a hint of mismanagement. But in fact, that is the truth, and that's just how I feel. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. I'm getting at the age where I'm a little feisty, more than I used to be.
All right, Commissioner Thurman or CEO Thurman, are you done?
I'm done.
Okay, great.
I'm done.
And, you know, I mean, I want to amplify what you said about this host program being of great benefit to our homesteaded taxpayers. So I don't think that anybody thinks that it is not a great accomplishment to help to defray the cost of property taxes for homesteaded property owners in the county in this way. And certainly by gaining the voters' approval for an additional penny for capital improvements through the SPLOST program, now we've been able to cover a gap that had been sort of part of the unfortunate part of the old host program, in that we did not have capacity to raise sufficient capital funds. Now, with the twin eHost and SPLOST, we are able to make major progress on our capital improvements program while still providing that tax relief. It is significant, I think, that looking forward to 2024, there are a lot of factors that were built into that by you and its legislative authors that strongly mitigate towards the perpetuation of the tax. And I certainly hope that subsequent versions of the SPLOST are approved so that we can keep on this track.
Thank you,
Sir Cochran Johnson.
Yes, Mr. Chair, and to CEO Thurman, you're absolutely right. Oftentimes here in DeKalb, you don't hear about the great things like snap finger wastewater treatment. We don't tout our wins. And in all honesty, CEO Thurman, if we don't create our narrative, someone else will. So coming from, yes, I charge us and challenge, our communications department to make sure people know what we do. And I believe that at this point, because of what we have here with eHost, it puts us in a unique position, but we have to be very careful because the truth is most people really don't understand what we do. People currently understand inflation. They understand that they're receiving tax bills and it's showing a greater liability. And we have to educate them. And through the current eHost, it gives us the ability to do even more because we can offset what you see with the rises in the tax digest through the careful use of these funds. But, we also have to be mindful that, that it's predicted that we will go into a recession. And how will that affect our collections? So, I want to thank Mr. Sigler because I know that he mingles in the fray of the weeds in order to come up with these projections. And you stand by the science of your numbers based upon history when you make your projections. So again, I'm very proud to say that I benefit as a DeKalb County resident and an individual who has filed Homestead from our eHost program. But again, I do think we need to do a far better job, CEO Thurman, of telling people what we do so that we create our own narrative so that we don't always hear, shall I say, the negative or what is unknown, and it overshadows perhaps all the good things that are happening. So I yield back, just wanted to make that statement and us to honestly, come to a conclusion on where we're going with the conversation as it relates to, the relief that we have the ability to provide the residents of DeKalb County.
Thank you, Commissioner Cochran Johnson. I see that Commissioner Larry Johnson, another member of the committee, has been able to join us now and has raised his hand. Commissioner Larry Johnson.
Yes, Mr. Chair, and I'm probably in the middle of all the conversation. I'm just getting on, but I just want to touch on just the communication piece. I just don't know what more you can do if you're dealing with people that don't want you there. Is getting out somewhere. We've been recognized nationally for a certain amount of programs, IT, community development. I don't want us to keep focusing on what's not being done and build on what we have done. I think it's going to be critical moving forward because if you're trying to get folks who don't like you to start liking you, you're never going to succeed. But you focus on who you have. And the reality is that over the last couple of years, the board and the CEO have been acting very fiscally responsible and have yielded great results. Infrastructure projects, water quality, construction, sewer. We're now able to let projects off of a list that was created where you couldn't build development. Now you have that going on. We've got 2 major loans from the federal government, only county probably in the nation to do so. So it depends on who you trying to get to put your story in the paper, but we got a good reputation and we got to just build on that, keep moving. You got a DC TV, it's Grammy Award winning. So somebody knows something about DeKalb and doing well. So my thing is for the e-host, I was here when we had no money in the bank and we were broke. And so we need to be moving forward on projects that we have. We see a lot of areas that need sidewalks, a lot of areas that need potholes filled. We need a lot of areas that need more roads repaved. So we have to really think about those things as we move forward. And it's just good to be in a position where we had the type of healthy reserves for us to make some decisions. But I would not wait for a recession to use the money, because our residents need to be seeing us do some things now. And while we have money in the bank, and we just got another pot of money, as well as the state. So we'll have surpluses at least through next year. So there's some projects that we need immediately to get done, which is roads, sidewalks, even some stormwater projects. Put the money in investments that people can use and see for the future.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. All right, Mr. Sigler. Commissioner Terry, can we let Mr. Sigler get through? All right, great. Thank you.
Mr. Sigler, you're on mute.
Yes. All right.
There
Thank you. Moving on to the next slide. This is nothing new. This was in the presentation that we gave last week. Just showing the proposed millage rates for this year. This is, for every city in DeKalb as well as the unincorporated area, all the various millage rates broken out. And then this is looking at the total millage rates by tax district. So again, unincorporated in the cities, and the change year over year. And what you'll see is some go up slightly, some go down slightly. It's really a function of which services they use, that the county provides in those areas, what their millage rate is, as well as the factors that are written into the special tax district law. And then looking at the millage rates by fund, the hospital fund and general fund, the remaining at the same level that they were last year. There is a shift of some of that, the millage rate from the general fund going to the hospital fund. And then really the more significant changes are in the designated services fund. And this is, purpose for that is really twofold, is to get their fund balances up to the level that the other tax funds are, as well as to provide some additional operating support in some areas that that were lacking. Okay, and this is just the timeline again. So next week is the third public hearing via Zoom about the millage rates, and we're also working to develop that substitute agenda item that is only the millage rate adoption. So really it'll be the same millage rate resolution as what was attached to the original agenda item. The Schedule A will be removed, and then we'll also add the resolution from the school board, just approving their millage rates as well.
Okay.
That concludes my presentation.
Great. Commissioner Terry.
Yes, can you put back the slide of all the funds and the millage rates there? I have kind of like a philosophical question, because I know that one of the priorities that I think have been outlined by the CEO is related to having the best trained and best paid police and fire, in the state. So I guess philosophically, when we lower the millage rate for the police fund, is that intentional because we have plenty of police fund reserves? I know that was a big portion of the police fund reserve, was like 22 million, I thought. So is there an idea that like the reserves will pay for that new investment in training and salaries, and that we can lower the millage rate this year, but do we expect it to go up again next year to sort of keep that pace of pay scale and training to sort of that, the high standard?
Right. Well, right. What you're seeing really with the movement between the millage rates there, you are correct that, basically, in a sense, the police fund balance is going down somewhat just because the millage rate's lowered. But the purpose then is to get, these other funds, the designated services funds, up to the same level as the rest, because they've basically been sort of the stepchildren for the last several years, where they've been short on both fund balance and just sort of operating resources. So that was a big goal in this, was just trying to get that fund balance stabilized across all funds. And what I would expect next year is that there will be much more stability in what the millage rates will be, because we'll no longer be trying to add so much to fund balance in one fund and take it down in the other fund. I think we will be, very close, if not right at the 2-month goal that we've had. And that'd be across all funds with the exception of maybe the hospital fund and the bond fund, just because they're, the expenses there are less volatile than in the other funds. But that was sort of the thinking behind this, is
there's sufficient funding there. I think that's
right,
Commissioner Terry. So you're spot on as it relates to, is there adequate funding to accomplish the goals that we presented? And the answer is yes.
And I agree with Mr. Williams that based on, the budget that was adopted for the police services fund, and what we're looking at potentially doing at mid-year, they have the resources necessary to do what we or do what the CEO has outlined.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Sigler, and thank you for your presentation. At this point, I would, Commissioner Larry Johnson, could you please take the chair, because I would like to make a motion.
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I would now like to move, for the purpose of discussion, that the committee recommend to the Board of Commissioners that this millage rate schedule be amended to devote some portion of the e-host reserve, which we can discuss, to additional tax relief against the fire fund millage rate, and then for the jurisdiction that does not pay into the fire fund, that rebate would be against their municipal tax. And if I could get a second for discussion, then we can discuss kind of what might be available in order to accomplish that.
I will second for the purpose of discussion.
Thank you. So, Mr. Sigler, as we had discussed previously, there is a substantial balance in the e-host reserve. I understand, the contingencies that y'all have advocated for to leave that untouched. I do believe that in any event in 2024, we will continue to collect a penny sales tax that will be substantially devoted to property tax relief. So I don't think that we're going to be left without a revenue source there. And would like to investigate the degree to which some portion of this e-host reserve could be devoted as a additional property tax relief. The reason that I am sort of positing the fire fund is because the fire fund is the most extensive non-countywide fund that we have. All jurisdictions except for the city of Decatur, where the e-host is levied, participate in the fire fund. And so we would be able to offer a credit against the fire fund that would benefit stakeholders inside and outside of cities in DeKalb. And then in the case of city of Decatur, we could calculate a credit against their municipal tax bill that would be of similar impact to them. So, right now I see that at least the budget as was submitted on 6/27, or the anticipated a 2.6 month reserve in the aggregate that is comprised of the budgetary reserve and the e-host reserve. And so I'm wondering what, expending some $20 million of the e-host reserve, if you could give me some benchmarks as to what $1 million in e-host reserve expenditure might give us in terms of reduction in those millage rates, or an impact in terms of the impact, say, on the $350,000 house that we use for illustrative purposes.
I'll attempt to answer your question as best as I can.
Thank you.
So I think the first thing I would say, though, is, I don't think I can comment on the legality of being able to use these taxes to offset the fire fund. The issue there, I think, is just, whether or not that was something that was anticipated or contemplated in the, when the e-host was implemented.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, and then the second point I'll make on that, and then I'll try to get to your question about the numbers, is that e-host is collected countywide, so it includes the city of Atlanta. So it'd be city of Atlanta as well as Decatur that would have to receive a credit against their municipal taxes because they don't participate in the fire tax fund.
Oh, so they pay the penny sales tax?
So they pay e-host, but they do not pay SPLOS.
Okay. Okay. All right. So then that would have to be factored into it.
So, and to get back to your question, which let me make sure that I have it correctly. You're asking if we were to apply, did you have a specific dollar amount from the?
Well, I mean,
reserve?
it should be a linear type of amount. So per $1 million worth of e-host reserve, or, some increment, how much could we lower the tax bill?
I don't have that number right at hand, but I think I can tell you in just a minute.
And I appreciate you calculating this on the fly. I had tried to, interact with the executive assistant and through him, you on this, since last Tuesday when we had first discussed this, and I haven't been able to get back any feedback. So I apologize for you having to do it kind of in the process of the meeting, but it's not for lack of trying.
Right. So what I have here is I have a calculator that really just a spreadsheet that I use to calculate these figures. And so for $1 million, each $1 million of the e-host reserve that we applied, the credit and the way the credit would work on these taxes is a little bit different because of the variance in millage rates among the different cities, as well as the differences in their exemptions and tax digest.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really applied as a credit on their 40% gross assessment. Mm-hmm. So that provides then an equalized percentage for the entire county. And so what that would be, and it's a very small, number, because it's a dollar amount to, I want to say, 7 decimal places here. So it's, a fraction that's provided per dollar of the 40% assessment. So I'm going to use the $325,000 house example again. And So every $1 million that would be added would provide just under $6 of property tax relief for a $325,000 house.
So $6.
Correct.
So if we used 20 million, that would be $120, right?
Correct.
Okay.
It would be actually 117.
Right.
Very close.
Okay. So then, so I guess to fill in that that line item, and regardless of where the credit actually goes against, it can go against any non-countywide millage rate, I believe is the way that it works. I then would suggest maybe that we go with, it's $117. I mean, I'd be willing to go down to up to $100. Can you work it out to where we could give them an extra $100 of credit?
Yeah.
What that would cost us?
Okay. It would be $17 million.
Okay. So my motion is to use 17 million in e-host reserve to increase host credits by $100 for the average home.
All right.
And, that is a motion for the purpose of discussion, and certainly would entertain, input on.
Can someone put that on, have it ready to be put on the chart, what we just said, so we can see it visually? Well, central staff, Commissioner Reader, anything else you'd like to add?
No, that's the main thing. So I guess the number is $17 million, and it would provide an additional $100 of tax relief to the average priced house in DeKalb.
All right. I'll go to Commissioner Cochran Johnson and Commissioner Rita Davis Johnson.
Thank you, Commissioner. My question now would be to the administration. As this motion has been made, what is the position of the administration on this particular request and allocation?
Right, so the millage rate as presented, with the idea of using any fund balance at the end of the e-host period, is our recommendation. So this is not something that the CEO and the administration is in support of.
So I'm sorry, you said this is not something that the CEO and the administration is in support of. It would be the administration's position that we wait until after. And at what time would the administration suggest we take action?
Well, the determination of the use of excess funds, well, it's actually already codified. Those excess funds have to be used for tax relief. But
Yes.
The position would be at the conclusion of the e-host program, which is, 15 months from now.
So it would be the recommendation of the administration to hold all funds until the end of the program.
That's it.
But one question that I have, we have been providing, and we will continue to provide the relief that is associated with Homestead.
Absolutely. And there will be the $140 million approximate numbers relief provided this year. There will not be a general fund or hospital fund tax paid to the county based on what is being presented. What is being proposed is an additional reduction to another millage rate. And we completely understand the thought behind it, but it is our goal with the entire budget, quite frankly, and is to try to have as much stability, try to provide for as many, I guess, stabilizing factors as possible. And so rather than a risk in 15 months of a significant increase, the thinking is let's stay the course and provide the relief at the end. And we're being consistent, as the CEO indicated, with the promise that has been made. And currently, we're tracking to provide more relief than was anticipated.
Okay. And with us waiting until the end of the program, which would technically, would that be the end of 2023?
It would be for tax year 2024.
Okay. So we would utilize what has been collected through 2023, if I'm correct, in terms of the program was actually voted upon in 2017. Collections began in 18. You have a 6-year period, 18, 19. So yes, through 2022.
Through 2023 and the 3 months of 2024.
Okay. All right. Thank you for answering those questions.
Sure.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Cochran Johnson. Go to Commissioner Marita Davis Johnson.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Johnson. And that 100,000, I mean, that $100 credit would be for a home valued at about $325,000. Is that correct, TJ?
Yes, Commissioner, that's correct.
Oh, okay, so it would be even less for homes less than that. And so, I mean, I'm like Mike, I'm a little old school, like the CEO, I'm a little old school also. I'd rather be safe than sorry, but I tell you what people will know is that if they have a significant tax increase because of this, property tax increase because of this. And as the CEO said, I was here in 2018, 2017. I saw where we were. And I think that most citizens can and do appreciate the significance of the tax relief that we receive now under EHOS. I know it was a lot of citizens that came to the mic that was involved. It was in support of it, 71%. And so they appreciate it like I appreciate it. Because I know if we did not have this EHOS, where I would be in payment of taxes, and I know that you would be even more than me, Commissioner Cochran Johnson, because of the value of your home. But, I appreciate it, and I know many people in the county appreciate it, but would we want to jeopardize, or would we want to not wait until this end of this 6-year period, that if there's something left, let's utilize it and let's give us some relief. But it's better to be safe than sorry. That's what this administration has been from day one. This administration has turned us around in so many different ways because our credit rating was messed up. We had no money. We had to, we didn't have to lay off people, as Commissioner Rader stated, but we did give them incentives to early retire. And so I say that we've been on a course that is stable and responsible. And for me to say, would I want to jeopardize it to get a possible additional tax relief, be greedy to get an additional tax relief of maybe $100 or less, because it's going to be a lot of people's homes in the county. There's not 325,000 to give up, to have to maybe give up some services and or have a tax increase. I don't think it's worth it. I think we can wait for another year and a half. And so I would go to course of the preference of the CEO. People have been behind the CEO, have supported the CEO because they see how responsible in many ways that he is. And they also see, because it hasn't been that long, where he has turned DeKalb around, because we were in the paper every day and it was negative coverage. And so we're telling our story, but they don't have the negative coverage to continue. So I'm with the administration. I say better safe than sorry. $100 or less could put us in a position. Now, one thing that we do know, if they get an increase in their property tax segments, we're gonna hear from that. Whether somebody reported or not, when they see it, we're gonna hear it. And so I say it's better to be safe than sorry, and let's move on the path that we've been on, one of stability and responsibility, and continue forth, and hopefully, based upon what we've done in the past, people will be willing to vote again for another splash in e-host. So thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Ted Terry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is a very interesting discussion. I do think that part of the practicality of maybe an average of $100 tax relief, it might seem kind of minimal and maybe nominal in kind of the grand scheme of things. And it might be more of an expression of solidarity with people that are struggling, and that we are listening to them. I think I've probably gotten more emails about the rent going up because assessments of multifamily complexes have gone up, but renters don't receive the home, the homestead credit, but renters certainly pay the sales tax. And so I think we do have to acknowledge that the e-host is a regressive tax that is helping subsidize all homeowners. And some homes are worth $100,000, some are worth $200,000, but some homes are $1 million and they're getting thousands more dollars in credit. So based on the formula, if your home is 375, 320 something $1,000, that's $100. But if it's $1 million, it's what, $300, I guess. It's triple. It just keeps going up. It doesn't matter how valuable the home is. I wish there was a way to do this more equitably. I wish there was a way to say, if you're in that $100,000 to $250,000 range, that $100 is going to mean more to you than someone who owns a home that's $1 million. Is you probably assume that someone living in a very expensive home probably has the ability to pay for it. And again, it's kind of nominal because we're only talking about potentially 17 to 20 million from the e-host reserves. And I do fall on the side of let's try to do what we can, even if it's a small amount, in a period of time where there is a lot of uncertainty. I'm very sensitive to the fact that Republicans are, blaming the inflation on Democrats, and that at the local level, by and large, it seems that most governments are holding the course. I don't think hardly any governments are doing a rollback rate. I think maybe Decatur was talking about it. But as far as I could tell, most of the cities will be increasing taxes on everybody by virtue of not doing the rollback rate. We are probably the most insulated from that because homeowners vote in higher numbers, and homeowners are going to continue to get that relief through the EHOS because we clearly have enough money in the reserves. And so I just got a lot of, mixed feelings about it. But I think the symbolic and even the philosophical argument of we do have these reserves, they are designed for tax relief. And even if we could do a small amount this year, it gives a signal that we're not willing to, just cut the government budget and roll back the rate, because we obviously have vital services that we want to keep performing that help a lot of people. But at the same time, indicating that we're willing to give what relief we can, no matter how small. And you're right, there is a part of it that says, well, what if we need that in 2024 or 2025? And it's a big what if. And so I think ultimately it kind of comes down to that. It's sort of just a philosophical thing. Do you really want to, you save for the rainy day, or is the rainy day now? And I'm erring on the side of the rainy day is now for some people, and that we should give them what we can, even if it is maybe a smaller amount than maybe they would like, but it's something. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Williams.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Johnson. Actually, the CEO has something he would like to add to the conversation, if that's okay.
Yes, I don't see him. So, all right, Mr. CEO, and then Commissioner Cochran-Johnson.
And CEO Thurman, you should be able to unmute, but I am sending you an unmute request just in case.
Sir. Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. I'm here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for letting me speak. Well, the first thing that one of the things I discussed is that, and this news item, I'm getting ready to agree in part with what Commissioner Terry said, but then I'm going to disagree. How about that? Well, the first thing that we should be mindful of with this whole idea about rollback rates, we are giving more tax relief without rolling back the millage rate. See, that's one of the discussions I've had with my friends, reporters. They don't want to give us credit for the $140 million that we're going to appropriate in ad valorem tax relief. So this is not a discussion about whether or not we're doing tax relief for homeowners in DeKalb County. And that was one of the concerns I had about the discussion itself. We don't want to undercut or diminish the fact that we are giving more tax relief than any other county jurisdiction in the state, period. And have done so over the last 5 years, period. One of the reasons we tend not to, as Commissioner Marita Davis Johnson spoke eloquently, and Commissioner Cochran-Johnson, is that sometimes we mistell our own story. So this is not a discussion about whether or not we're going to give historically high levels of tax relief, because that is already true. That is already true. Now, the second part of this is what Commissioner Terry, what I'm agreeing with him on, it is regressive. So of the 17 million, what percent of that is going to flow to homes valued at $500,000 or more? I submit to you that 70 to 80% of it will go to that. So if anyone interested in impacting moderate and low income people would find this as unacceptable, because at one level it is. But I also add, DeKalb has the only SPLOS EHOS where food and drugs are exempt from the sales tax, which mitigates some of the regressivity. We don't talk about that either, but we put that into the bill. We recognize that it's regressive, but we put into the bill where we exempt food and groceries from the sales tax, which mitigates the regressivity on low and moderate income people. That's something we can celebrate. Last thing is this, and I agree, you want to take the risk, but people remember the last thing that happened. If in 2024, if the last thing that happened is we have a sharp tax increase, all these previous 6 years will be forgotten. Now, I won't be running in 2024, but that's what will be remembered, is that we raised the taxes. Now, unfortunately, I'll still be CEO and I'm going to have to accept the responsibility of the decision. Part of decision-making is that if you're going to make the decision, then you have to be in a position to accept responsibility for it. I don't think it's fair to force a decision if you're not going to be there to accept responsibility for it if it goes south. That's just not fair. It's not fair to the people who will be holding the seats. We've come this far. We provided historic levels of tax relief. Every penny will go, so the discussion is whether or not the tax relief will show up in 23 or 24. And not only that, you're going into matter of fact, I just read on the internet, the Atlanta Federal Reserve announced today that we are already in the recession. It's not an if, it's a fact now. We're already in it. And I was on Panola Road on Sunday, and I travel over there on Sundays once a month. There were almost no cars on the road. People can't even afford the gas to joyride anymore. When we were out with the sanitation workers on 4th of July, we were in between. I went in to Macy's to get me a shirt to wear to a barbecue later the evening. Nobody was shopping. It's already happening. So it's not a if, it's a now. And if you don't make the right decision now, 2023, I said a couple of days ago, you got to know which way the frog gonna jump. Once he or she jumps, it's too late. It's too late. And Commissioner Marita David Johnson, she ain't nowhere near my age. I don't know why she keeps saying that, but I know what it's like when you are wrong. But I also know that we are wrong. I know who's going to have to accept the responsibility for it because I know who made the promise that we were going to do it right. And which is fine. I volunteered for the duty. I know who will be standing there in 2024 saying we screwed it up. So what we need to do, please, if we will stay on the path that we're on, what Mr. Williams said, every dime has to go to property tax relief. Every dime. It can't be spent for anything else. And we know that we're only going to have 3 months of revenue in 2024. So if we don't have additional revenue, there will be a sharp tax increase in 2024. Just practical. I mean, be practical and think about 2024. Some people will. So why, just from a practical, hardcore, Machiavellian, political kind of thought process, why would you even take the risk when you don't have to, when you can actually be on the ballot talking about we delivered on $700 million in tax relief? Why would anyone want to do that? Why would anyone ask somebody to do that? And I respect the chairman, Commissioner Rader. You know, we love you. You've done a great job for this county. But I just have to disagree on that point, and I apologize for it. We have to finish this deal. You know, our reputation, Commissioner Johnson said it, Marita David Johnson said, we don't get a pass in DeKalb County. We don't get a pass. They don't give us a pass. Even the slightest misstep ends up on the front page of the AJC. We don't get a pass. And that's okay. That's just the rules. I guess I've been through it long enough. Y'all know we don't get a pass. And every day we feel 8, 9, 10 open record requests every day. And they're not asking for good news from DeKalb County. I'm looking at 4 of them right now in my phone. And that's the game. So we don't get a pass. We can't make missteps. We have to play it safe because that's the only way that's going to keep us safe. And that's it. And we got to win. Why would we risk one of the biggest victories we've ever claimed of generating $700 million in tax relief? And Commissioner Johnson is right. We are spending $300 million on projects, on roads and sidewalks and fire stations. Fire station number 7 almost done. The chief tell me we're getting ready to build 4 more. We're planning for Bobby Burgess. We've done all type of renovations at all of our buildings. You all, we finish this, you get to write the ticket for the next SPLOS. Let me tell you something about this SPLOS, and I'll stop. They wouldn't even give us a regular SPLOS because we were DeKalb County. We got what we call a training wheel SPLOS because they said we hadn't proven that we could manage the money appropriately, that we had a history of dysfunction and mismanagement and corruption. So the bill that we begged and got through the legislature is a training wheel SPLOS. What you all are going to have is the opportunity to have a SPLOS like every other county in Georgia has. So just finish this and then we can go build. We can build civic centers and things that we should have had decades ago. They wouldn't even let us do it. We had to spend, 80% of the money on streets. They wouldn't even give us the authority to do it. I sat there in the committee with the chair. And had to pretend like I was keeping my cool and being respectful when he was telling me who and what I was without knowing me and telling me he couldn't trust me.
All right. That it, Mr. CEO?
That's it, Mr. Chair.
All right. Thank you. Go to Commissioner Lorraine Cochran Johnson.
Thank you so much, Commissioner and Acting Chair. And let me say to Commissioner Terry, I don't care if you have a home right now that's valued at $250 or $2 million.
Say it.
You are feeling the impact of this economy. I often laugh because my 30-pound box of crab legs went from $540 to $780. So now I pay careful attention because when I get up there, I'm wondering, what is this? So a lot of people we all, I won't say a lot, everyone is affected. And I know that every dollar matters. But one thing that I want us to be mindful of, because this is a conversation that we've had, but we haven't had. Of course, all of you, I always assume that what I'm receiving, my fellow commissioners are. And if you are like me, even though I'm making the assumption and maybe I'm doing it, blindly, I've had a lot of people reach out with concern. And I'm explaining to them that what they're experiencing is not the result of DeKalb County increasing millage. It's the result of your property value that has increased. And, my big concern, understanding what's really going on out there in the marketplace as it relates to many residential properties, particularly according to the data, south of Memorial Drive, 57% of property zone R100 residential were not sold to individuals, but LLCs, private investors, and Wall Street. And in many instances, they are paying above fair market value. Quick closes, 10 days, all cash. And I really want to ensure that Mr. Hicks or DeKalb has something in place that allows us to patrol for any inflated property values that may be used in the county so that we have a way of bringing these back in line with reality, because that's more detrimental to the taxpayer than anything. So I'm going to put that back out there because I've raised that question a time or two. And I really want to hear from someone and COO Williams, please don't let that conversation go away because that's really important. And we have to have that conversation. Now, in terms of 2024, I want clarity. Will we have 3 or 4 months of e-host funds? Will it be 3 months or 4 months in 2024 that we will collect?
TJ, it's 3 months, correct?
Yes,
And-
that's correct.
Okay, so we'll have 3 months.
But it's also true that we would revert to the original host and continue to collect that penny for tax relief, and 20% of it could be used for capital improvements. So we will continue to collect that penny sales tax with 80% dedicated to tax relief.
Understood. Because, I hear, and let me say to you, Commissioner Rader, I truly appreciate you and your diligence as it relates to, I think most of us have certain things that we're very passionate about. And as it relates to fiscal responsibility, we all share that responsibility and burden, and we all want to do the right thing. So I really understand where you're coming from. But my concern now is down the road, understanding that in 2024, even with what you're saying, and someone correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't want to be like the emperor who wore no clothes and sit here with a false assumption. The money would better be served at the end because we're only collecting for a 3-month period, and that would allow us to fill any gap so that there would not be any, shall I say, for lack of better words, hopefully no diminished relief to the residents of DeKalb County. Now, Mr. Siegler, if I'm wrong, explain to me that we will continue collecting at the same rate because in 2024, we have to have a referendum on this in order for us to continue. So I just want to hear from you. And then from there, I have no further questions, Commissioner Johnson.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner. I may have missed the very first part of it, but your question, but I think what you asked me was in 2024, after the current e-host expires, if host came back into effect, how that would affect the property tax relief in 2024. Is that close to what you were?
Yeah, that is close, but also Commissioner Rader has indicated that we will continue to collect the penny.
Right. My understanding or my recollection of the e-host law was if it's not renewed, then the host law goes back into effect. And under the host law, it's still a 1 cent sales tax, so that would continue to be collected for the remainder of 2024. Its application, though, is different. So it is 80% minimum that is dedicated towards tax relief. The difference there is it's applied to all county millage rates, well, all county maintenance and operations millage rates, so not the general obligation bond debt. So because of that, the law also sets out what it calls equalization payments, where some portion of the proceeds have to go to the cities that pay less in county taxes, who the total county millage rate for them is less because they don't participate in as many county services. So I believe in, some of this I'm a little bit rusty on host, but I believe the way it would work is the equalization payments come off the top. And then whatever's left is kind of determined whether it's going to be 80%, dedicated to property tax relief or 100% and et cetera. So it could be anywhere between 80 and 100%. So if we follow the same sort of blueprint that we use when when eHost went into effect, what we would do in 2024 is calculate a credit for eHost for the first 3 months, and then a credit for host for the final 9 months. And so that host credit would then be 80% or whatever percentage, we choose, the county gets to choose which percentage to set that out. Minus whatever the equalization payments are and the other amounts that would be going to capital outlays for the county. So, and then that amount, let's just say, to pick a number out, $75 million for 9 months. That's the amount that would go to host property tax relief. That would then be spread across, like I said, all county millage rates for maintenance and operations. So that would be general fund, hospital fund, police fund, designated fund, fire fund, and I might have missed one, but I think that's most of them. So that's a long answer. I think the short answer is, yes, hosts would continue, or hosts would resume if eHost is not renewed. However, the host credit that would be provided differs from what would be provided under eHost, and in many cases, would be less than what is provided under eHost.
And Mr. Chairman, that could result in an increase in your ad valorem tax bill, which would be in the minds of folk, even if it's the same amount, once you spread it out, your ad valorem tax bill could actually increase under that scenario. The bottom line is we don't know what's actually going to happen if that is in fact what occurred. That is the problem. It's what Commissioner Terry said. It's the unknown. Some folks are more risk averse than others. It's the unknown that raises the biggest concern I have. We don't know what the economy is going to do, and we don't know whether or not the current eHost is going to be continued with another vote. You don't know. I don't know. No one knows.
Mr. Cochran, is that it? I have a question since I hadn't said anything yet. You finished, Commissioner Cochran Johnson?
I am. And the last thing that I will say to CEO Thurman's point, I can remember before there was even a notion of me serving in any capacity for government, because it wasn't an aspiration. But even that time, because of managing newspapers, I watched the Georgia game. And I can remember them consistently referring during that period of turmoil. When they referred to DeKalb, they referred to us as dysfunctional DeKalb. And I would think, wow, is that not harsh? So, understanding what you say, because we don't have many conversations. But when I sit here and hear you say how you were handled at the State House as it related to eHost, and the fact that we have training wheels, that we've come such a long way. No one refers to us as dysfunctional. Do we have room for improvement? Absolutely, but everyone does. And I often say, CEO, that I do credit you for giving us a degree of, shall I say, respect and most importantly, stability that has led us not to be seen in that light. And I don't want to see us, go back to a lot of what people saw as the history of DeKalb, because we are better than that. I appreciate you sharing as you do your experiences, because that really bothers me, how you were handled. But again, even with what happened, I've learned to take what I'm given, and you're correct. Everybody may not like you. And honestly, I think we're all good, decent people. But regardless of relationships or feelings, our first responsibility is to the people. And with that said, I'm fine with, I know everyone has the best intent, but thanks for sharing. And I do yield back to you, Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you so much. Just a couple of comments. One is the reality is that the splash has been very successful. I've seen it. I've been a part of it. I was here when we launched it. Matter of fact, if you really want to be honest, the last one that we did libraries, we did performing arts centers and sidewalks, there was no mismanagement in any of those either. So DeKalb was not cited back then for projects. It was other stuff that may have been going on. So the reality of the situation is if you deal with just the issue of delivering on the projects, we showed that when we passed 3 bonds that the residents passed in one night, we gave us libraries, green space, and infrastructure improvement. That was history back then, and we delivered. Now we're at the splash level, and we see where we are. My question is, why would you wait until 2024 to have a bond referendum on splash when you should do it in 2023, and then you can give the funding or the extra possibly in 2023? What's the rationale with that? We're not doing that because you wouldn't wait till 2024 to have a splash referendum. You would do it the year before. Or am I not?
No, you're correct. Excuse me, Mr. Chair. You're correct. It's my understanding
You're not waiting.
3, right?
Right. And the other thing about the splash, while we got 6 years, the last year is an optional year where you can do more projects with the splash money. So you're not limited. They put that in there in the bill. If we did what we said we were going to do for the first 5, in the 6th year, you got a chance to do other infrastructure projects that you did not include on the list. That was part of the moving us towards a good faith effort. But I know we do have a lot of infrastructure needs still. The roads, we need sidewalks, parks improvements. So we're still not, remember the list that we had, and I think the CEO can get this list. The maintenance needs of this county has not been conquered with this first splash. And so it's going to require a number of splashes to do that. And so, but at this point, if it's not broke, I'm not going to tamper with it because we need to see where we're going till the end, like we told the residents, and then we can make some decisions in 23 or 24 on whether we go from here. So Commissioner Terry and Mr. Chair, how much time we have left? I want to make sure, I don't know, I didn't see.
Yeah, we've actually gone over our time for the meeting, so I think that you can bring this to a question and then we'll have to go to the the main.
All right, this will be our last comment, Commissioner Terry, and then we'll call the question.
Yes, I had a question. Thank you. I had a question about when we get to the end of this e-host period, and is the philosophy that we, sort of hold on to as much reserve as, as reasonable, but when we get to the end of the e-host, whatever's left in the reserves, would we just try to clear that out in that final year? And assuming that we would, in essence, sort of start the e-host over with a new legislation. Does that make sense?
Mr. Sigler?
Yeah, I can respond to that. So yes, I think that is exactly what we're saying. Maybe the one qualification to put on that is we don't have to wait until the last year to use the e-host reserve. If next year, sales tax proceeds or collections decline to a point where we wouldn't be able to provide as much tax credit, we could then increase the tax credit next year using the reserve. But in any case, at the end of 2024, or when we come to the end of e-host in 2024, whatever remains of the e-host reserve would be used for e-host tax credits.
Okay, and that year's budget.
Correct.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, and also the ARPA funds have to be expended by 2024. So all of that extra money that we had, you will now get back to a normal budget in 2024 if we don't have any more additional investments from the federal government. So you can expect surpluses for a while until that happens. So Commissioner Rader has a motion. It's been properly seconded. Is there any more discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of the motion, let me hear your hands and word.
Aye.
All right, one yay, all against. Two against, the motion fails. We'll go back to our first motion. Mr. Chair, I'll turn it back over to you. I don't want to keep running.
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. I appreciate you taking that item while I made that motion. And so now we have before us a decision as on a recommendation on the schedule of millage rates as was proposed by the administration. We are reminded that this only is in reference to the schedule of millage rates, and the host credit is proposed and is not does not include the budget amendment that will be dealt with separately. And that would be in the form of a substitute to the item that was originally introduced. So I would entertain a motion on the administration's proposal for millage rates and host credit independent of the budget amendments that was previously proposed.
I would move to approve as previously proposed.
I have a second, but a question.
Okay. So the motion, just to clarify, is to approve only the millage rates and the host credit as proposed by the administration.
Correct.
As a substitute to the original proposal that is in our agenda at this point. Now, Commissioner Larry Johnson, your question.
Yes, when will Schedule A be reviewed?
As quick as we can get it back on. It wasn't a matter of wanting to not deal with it, but you know, the administration said that you know, there was perhaps more work to be done on it. Plus, committees needed to review the thing. So they will bring it back as an independent item, and we will deal with it as we have in the past to get, you know, committee review and then make a recommendation based upon that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, Commissioner Cochran-Johnson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, I want to say to you, I appreciate your sentiment, but you know, I always do, you know, vote my conscience, and I've done that with this item. I'd also say to Mr. Sigler, you know, as we're reviewing this budget, and we have discussed the increase in pay for policing and in certain departments, I want to see us have the best paid officers in the state, in the country for that matter. But again, I'm very interested because we're discussing raising salaries based upon funding that is temporary. So make sure when you come to us, whatever plan you're presenting, because I don't want us to wake up later and have growing pains, that there's a firm understanding of how any pay increases will be sustained in the long term, independent of the last tranche of money that we've received, because that money is going to go away. But when we make commitments and obligations, they will not. And those of us who remain will have the fiduciary responsibility of ensuring that we are able to continue whatever has been started. Now, I know that's a totally different conversation, but just as we're having the conversation today, I wanted to put that out. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Cochran-Johnson. So the motion is to approve the substitute as described.
I had a question.
Oh, yes, sir.
Is Mr. CEO available still? I had a question for him. Is he not
I
on?
do not currently see him online. Mr. Metelsky is, do you see that?
Okay, I'll ask it to Mr. Williams. Mr. Williams, you got to make sure that you talk about, you want best in class in all of the departments.
Absolutely.
And you keep sitting there being quiet when just, so you got to say, we're looking for best in class in all our departments to be better paid and better moving forward. So I hope you can get that point out as well as you move forward with the process and funding, because I all want to make sure that that happens in all our departments and how we do it, because it's hard pressed for everybody. And so not taking away, I think we need to make sure public safety is the best in class as well. But I just don't want people to think that you're not doing the rest of the employees as well as we move forward. That's all. I just don't want, we keep hearing that. But I want to
and Commissioner Johnson, as of late, I mean, just because it is such a priority, but if you look back over the last 4 or 5 years between getting parks nationally accredited for the first time, fleet management ranking in the top 5 as high as number 2 in the nation, IT number 2 in the nation, 911 fully accredited. It is not lost on us that all of the departments are critically important. It is just that right now there's such a shortage of law enforcement specifically. That's what we're talking about, but it is not at the shortchanging of anyone else, because if you look at our record, and you've been there,
Yeah, I'm not saying, and I'm not saying you that. I just need you to complete the equation when you say that, so everybody will know that we are focusing on public safety, but you also have not, that you also looking for best in class in those other departments as well. So okay.
And it's been demonstrated. Absolutely.
Right. I know you have, but this has been done. The Board of Commissioners have been there and will continue to be there for benefits and pay to make sure that those departments are moving in the right direction. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. So the question is on the floor to approve the substitute. All in favor, please raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Question.
Commissioner Cochran-Johnson?
Aye.
Okay, so that's 2 ayes, and I'm going to vote nay. So the ayes have it, and the recommendation is to approve the substitute as outlined. Commissioner, all right, Davis Johnson, I think some of us have got to go. So is there a?
It's real fast. I just want to say, I didn't get the extent of the substitute. So if you could just tell me.
It was approved to approve only the millage rates and host credit is proposed by the administration, and to return for Schedule A, which was the budget amendment.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other business come before the committee? Hearing none, all in favor, please entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved.
Second by Commissioner Larry Johnson. All in favor, please raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.